The march to the semifinals continues here in the inaugural season of the Hearthstone Grandmasters. Welcome everyone to the final match of the setup matches for European playoffs. My name's Frody. I'm joined by Sottle, and we're going to be covering the rematch once again between Orange and Kolento. Sottle, I sense a trend. Seems like the first seeds have been just winning and moving into the semifinals, and now we just keep getting the rematches from the initial games from the groups.
Yeah, it's twice that I've been in this spot, just the way that the matches have panned out and the way that the casting has panned out as well, that I've cast the opening match and then the deciders match that have both days been between both sets of players. But we've got Orange and Kolento yet again, because Kolento winning out the first time through, but Orange coming back because, interestingly, Kolento's kind of got through supposedly an unfavored rogue matchup without having too much dedicated anti-rogue stuff in his lineup, which I think is a pretty interesting talking point.
Yeah, we've seen this happen even just yesterday, where the mage and the rogue kept trading back and forth, but it was in succession. It was like a rogue, then the mage win, then the rogue win, and then the mage would win, and back and forth. And today, it's a little bit of that yo-yo action back and forth, but one thing to pay attention to is that historically, through yesterday's matches, both in Americas and in Europe, whoever won that initial match also won the second time around in dominant fashion. So it was a very interesting thing to see, and obviously it's best of 3, small sample sizes,
right?
But it doesn't really matter too much in the grand scheme of things as long as you just move on and win and go to the semifinals.
Did you sneak that one in for me deliberately? The yo-yo action? Was that on purpose?
No, but
well,
perhaps it's subconscious. You're infiltrating my mind.
Yeah, you can see from Orange's side, he is bringing in Walk the Plank, Fairy Dragon, Betrayal, which is pretty standard these days in terms of dealing with Mage, but we just saw Kolento really just sticking with his primary throughout, as he did in the first series. And yeah, this matchup has kind of been the story of perhaps the second half of Grandmasters. It's been an incredibly common matchup, at least through Europe, and it has gone back and forth. You mentioned how we've seen it go back and forth in playoffs. Even in our crunch day, in our division qualifiers, in Division A, I believe it was, every important game that had playoff implications ended up being Mage versus Rogue, and they were all won by the player who was in contention for the final spot, regardless of which side of the matchup they were on. So I think, there's a lot of disagreement on terms of what the actual matchup statistics should be, but I think we can all agree that it's pretty close. That's what we're learning either way, because it does seem to go back and forth between high-quality players.
Yeah, well, we're going to go into game number 1 here with Kolento on the play, Orange on the coin. This will be the 3rd series in a row for Kolento. So, at least he's played a lot of games today, regardless of whether or not he's able to go through the semifinals. There's only 2 spots available for Group B, and Hunter Ace has already gotten his ticket. If you just tuned in, that's right, world champion Hunter Ace finished first in this group and finished first in the playoffs bracket going into the semifinals. The winner of this will play Phenomeno, or Pheno as we like to call him, in the semifinals on Sunday. So taking a look at the composition of the opening hands here, a little bit awkward on Orange's end, but he does have the Hench Clan Burglar for the double Vendetta.
Right.
But looks like it's pretty slow until then. Well, that is until he picked up his evil Cable Rat here. So do you like playing the Cable Rat, or do you like developing the hero power to invest in the mana now?
I definitely think there's a lot of merit to just going Cable Rat here, especially if you find Faceless Lackey. That can kind of fill in your pressure turn on turn 3 that you don't have anything for right now if you don't want to use coin. It makes sense to me. I think even like the lesser lackeys, like Evolve Lackey in this position, because you have Spirit of the Shark, even that can end up being very explosive very quickly. So I like it. Just get the mana spent. 2-drop on 2, nice and simple.
We view lackeys here as equals. They're all special and unique in their own way. No lesser lackeys.
Look, you can't.
There's no caste system here.
You can't just give everyone a participation badge, Dan. People need to learn valuable life lessons. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
We're trying to lower the ESRB rating here of Hearthstone. We're not trying to teach them adult life lessons this fast, okay?
Hey, you're never too young. Sometimes people are just better than you, and you got to hold that L. That's just a fact of life.
Faceless Lackey, you can hang out with me. You're cool. The lesser Lackey. Jeez. Kind of true, though, to be honest. And Orange picks up one of the best lackeys in terms of the win rate. Cobalt Lackey is, I think, the highest win rate Lackey and very powerful to... And then you can see how Kolento values that tempo. Time after time, we've been seeing Snipstat being played on 3, and I think Kolento's done it a few times just today.
Yep. Very, very powerful tempo tool. It's such a good card, such a flexible card. It's the reason why it's becoming fairly ubiquitous across a lot of classes right now. Is if you need a 3-drop, it's a 3-drop. If you need a 6-drop, it's a 6-drop. If you need a 9-drop, it's a 9-drop. Like it just does so many things for you. And that's just at the very base level before you start adding in all the permutations of the different ways you can stack it when you get to 6 and 9 as well. Like it's just all things to all people.
That's right. It is the true messiah of Hearthstone neutral tempo cards. And it's also just a metallic crab tank with a golden turret.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's totally why everyone plays it in every
It's just
deck.
awesome.
Yeah, no, you got it.
Kolento coming up on a very weak turn here. Normally, when you have such like slow development on the rogue side, you like to draw cards or maybe set up tempo yourself, but Kolento doesn't really have much going on. His best play to develop is Mirror Image, and that doesn't really do much, but it invests into the potential Sea Giant.
Agreed.
If Orange plays 2 minions, which I don't think he will, but if he does, Sea Giant's playing.
Yeah, Kolento's definitely considering things like the 1-drop Lackey that he knows he has into Evil Miscreant for possibilities of Orange's turn, which would then bring that Sea Giant down to 5 and be very, very important. Of course, depending on what the Lackey is,
right.
Some of them would be able to affect that kind of position. But I think it's a heads-up play here just to throw out the mirror images. They're unlikely to be taken off the board over the next couple of turns anyway, just the way this pans out. So I think investing in it there makes a lot of sense.
Well, Henchclan Burglar comes down and offers 3 utility cards, 2 from the Priest class. Silence does have its use cases in certain spots against Mage. Mortal Coil, of course, just more of a nice opportunity to get 1 extra damage, maybe a card. Circle of Healing, I feel like, is less useful, but it is a free spell to cost in terms of mana. I feel like his hand could use a lot of improvement, so I want to take the Mortal Coil just to draw another card from the deck.
I'm leaning towards Mortal Coil for pretty much the same reasons.
I mean, I could understand Silence if he felt like it was late in the game. He needs to make sure like he needs some way to stop Antonius, or maybe if his board gets frozen, he can push damage. But it feels like it's just better to take the Mortal Coil for overall use cases.
That is a good point, actually. The Silence does have a lot of upside because of how often you do get frozen in the matchup. We've even seen in APAC, I believe one player brought in Dalaran Librarian into an anti-mage tech in their own mage deck. And just be able to unfreeze 2 minions and push damage, which is it's pretty cute, honestly. I kind of liked it the first time I saw it.
It is very cute, but that's all it is. I feel like it seems like it's getting fancy for the sake of being fancy when you realize that it's probably not very flexible of a card, and you're just often stuck holding onto it. But I guess maybe that's what you want in a format like Specialist, right? You just need it to have high impact for 1 game.
Right. Yeah, I think definitely the format does open you up to kind of doing more stuff like that. You can definitely go too far out of left field, obviously, but I don't know. Dalaran, I was kind of on board. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, Orange picks up Life Drinker, so none of these really, nothing worth writing home about except for the Spirit of the Shark combos that you can pull off with, say, Evil Cable Rat instead. And I think what Orange is doing is assembling all of the tools that he would want to use later on in the game, just to see what he can do to create combos for Kolento's inevitable big swing turns. The only downside is that right now it looks like Sea Giant will be playable next turn no matter what. 2 Sea Giants.
We've seen multiple players already just having to navigate ways through these tricky Sea Giant hands. Kolento himself kind of doing the best job of it in the first series, where he used kind of Kagar in combination with Snip Snap and then Mirror Images over the course of a couple of turns to just get a huge double Sea Giant swing turn. Right now, he just doesn't have the support tools for those Sea Giants. Like, they're playable, but they're not going to be coming down ultra cheap anytime soon.
Well, 5 mana 8/8 still very nice, just that Kolento floats another mana crystal. And Orange can deal with this giant in a handful of ways.
Yep.
Might be able to pick up a better spell with Ethereal Lackey if he finds a nice clean removal option instead. Although he is running out of hand space, so maybe dumping things like the Vendetta isn't actually a bad thing. The only things that I've seen mages these days also utilize just like a full full turn's use of mana to try and bait out removal too, right? You've seen some people who like, oh, now that you like use removal on the Mountain Giants, you can't contest my Antonitis anymore. And they just play it on 7.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something that Mage does have kind of the luxury to do because there aren't any decks apart from like full-blown Control Warrior that have enough removal to kill everything that Mage can generate, right? So they can kind of choose to do that 1-2 bait and switch kind of thing.
Speaking of the 1-2, here's a double evolve from Witchy Lackey. Oh, gosh, the Tendies. The Tendi Tauren.
So based on the way that Orange has played this one out, he's going to go 1 Vendetta and Kobold Lackey by the looks of things. Yeah,
it makes sense. Vendetta's going to universally do 4 damage across the board, always, unless you have spell damage. While the Kobold Lackey, you're getting upside of it now.
Right.
Your opponent also played a Sea Giant, so, you know, a little bit more confident to extend onto the board. Coincidentally, it plays into the second Sea Giant.
Yes.
That happens.
But I think it's good recognition from Orange to say, well, I've seen 1 Sea Giant. You know, if he has the second one in his top 10, it's very unlikely at this point.
Well, he also has to Spear the Shark, so this is away from the fight back. Hakar the Soul Flare and Jumbo Shrimp comes out.
Shadow Step here alongside either the SI or the Kobold is going to represent a lot of removal in this position.
Yeah, I mean, he has even just, you know, Vendetta SI7 is enough to kill it. Maybe he wants to invest Shadow Step into more cards as well. It's interesting to think about. Oh, he also has this really funny thing of being able to Shadow Step his Tendies and buff his board.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
That is cool. I'm not sure if that's exactly what he's looking for, but the mana expenditure is good for it.
This guy's toast.
And that's kind of what makes the Rogue deck really sweet. You know, it's the idea that these Shadow Step combinations or Waggle Pick assortments that you can get, like, really create these really unique combo scenarios for Rogue, which gives it a very dynamic play pattern game to game, which is why a lot of Rogue players, you know, they're pretty big fans of the Shark for reasons like this.
Kind of curious as to where this turn is going, because he seems to be signaling that this isn't Ethereal Lackey kind of turn. So he's gonna use the 4, then end up with a Mortal Coil instead. Okay, this makes sense. Just wondering whether the turn should have started with the Ethereal Lackey to like find more efficient answers to the minions.
See, now Orange played really fast because of the rope. He finds double walk the plank. Corrupted Blood being drawn.
Yeah, a lot of things just happened, but let's go back to stage 1, what you were saying.
So, Orange was running out of time, and the rope was burning out, and he had the opportunity to play Evil Miscreant, which is why we traditionally draw first before we try to see if we can go for, like, Discover options. Unless you need that desperation Hail Mary scenario. And so Orange wanted to, but then instead he played it, he picked up double walk the plank. And now is in a position where Kolento even drew another blood, so a lot of damage is coming through. Everything seems to be tilting towards Orange in his favor right now.
But in that situation, he kind of had to do things in a fairly specific sequence because his draw was from Mortal Coil, which kind of like, it has to be one of the last things you do because it's finally killing a minion. But he had multiple points where he was potentially drawing, right? Like he was also drawing cards off the Spell Lackey, which could have gone first in that position, found more efficient answers, found a sap or something. So there's actually a lot of fluctuating decisions in which order to play that turn in. My only like hard criticism is that Orange took too long to start doing things, you know, and he eventually roped out and left himself where he couldn't react to the draw, was barely able to react to his discovery spells. If it had been a tougher decision, then yeah, just pick the 2 walk the planks, then maybe he would have been in trouble there as well.
Yeah, walk the plank here. He didn't really need it because he had a way to answer the Antonitis without it, but it's a very nice tempo tool here to push damage. Now, when Orange sees 2 fireballs being generated through the evocation, he is probably thinking about the burn plan from Kolento, right? And Kolento, of course, tried to come up with some kind of game plan. However, he doesn't have Alex Strauss in the deck. So I kind of wonder long-term, what's he really hoping for here?
Not much. I think he's kind of just hanging in at this point and looking for really, really niche outs to come off the top. Things pairing with that Conjurer's Calling, ways to survive. But like most outs that I can think of in this position involve drawing 2 cards a turn because he needs multiple cards that he just doesn't have access to either of them right now.
All right. I mean, that is one nice card you could use, but he did just also convert his evocations into fireballs.
Yep.
But it's a possibility.
There must be a way.
Yeah, this way, the way that the path to victory here for Kolento does require some random generated resources for Kolento to be able to stop Orange's aggression. There is a Frost Nova to guarantee no attacks from the board of the existing minions. But he's going to hope that this spell, Mana Cyclone, is really powerful. Flame Strike, Blizzard. Well, a little bit of irony, of course. Oh, is that just lethal, perhaps? Yes.
Yep, 6 on the Life Drinker.
And that's going to do it. So a game 1, dominant victory for Orange, landing in a perfect game because he goes it back up to 30.
That matters. Style points, all the way.
Yeah. That's how you want to. There's so many like ways you can just have a satisfying victory and then like to bounce back to full life and have a complete dominant. Perfect.
Whoa. Mind the backdrop, Orange. Careful.
Oh, wow.
Back there. Whew.
Yeah, scooting back a little bit too far. But Orange starts off with a 1-0 lead. And you know, the good news for Orange fans is that things get better, at least on paper, right? Because he does add the Betrayal and the Fairy Dragon, the Walk the Plank in his secondary deck. Kolento doesn't have that anti-rogue technology that we are used to seeing because, you know, he's preparing for other matchups. He's preparing for the Mage Mirror. He's preparing for Warriors.
Yeah, and I mentioned this specifically earlier. Kolento shouted out, you know, as you're looking at the cards that Orange does bring in here, that's basically the cards that he discovered in that matchup. That's what he's bringing in. Kolento mentioned that he was looking at other people's techs versus Rogue and saying, well, they're only bringing in 1 card, 2 cards, 3 cards. Like, if that's the case, then surely what that tells you is that the matchup's fine to begin with, so you're better off using that deck to tech towards a completely different matchup.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see if there's any possibility for Kolento to justify switching, but it doesn't seem to be the case here. You'd be removing too many important tools. Even if you can justify things, such as adding a Harrison Judge, you just take out too much.
Yeah.
So from Orange's perspective, he's going to be in a pretty good spot. Once again, landing on the coin. This is looking really bad here for Kolento.
Now, this is an interesting mulligan to me from Orange's side because he's been leaning quite heavily on these Vendettas in the matchup from what we've seen so far. However, now he has a deck that draws removal off the top a lot more often than his primary deck does. So does he want to keep removal options like this and potentially continue to draw more removal and then just have no real options for pressure? Or does he want to risk the inverse, where he throws removal away and then he just keeps drawing minions for the rest of the game and his removal stays buried in the deck?
Yeah, this is actually a very similar hand to last game too, right? The double Vendetta Hedgestamp Burglar. He had Spear the Shark instead. Ooh, he throws away the backstab.
Backstab, yeah. This is very similar to what he did in Game 1 of Series 1, where he just held on to raw Vendettas in his hand in the mulligan.
And I don't mind, the only thing is that if Kolento came out the gate swinging with, you know, tempo options with Sorcerer's Apprentice, I always feel like having backstab is just good to ensure that there's no cheese victory for the mage. And, you know, I think maybe I've just been burned a little bit too many times.
I think at best you shut down one of many routes in which they can achieve a cheese victory with mage.
Right, but it feels like when you have those resources early on, you still at least, like, because you can go toe-to-toe in the mid-game a lot better when you have Walk to Plane.
That is fair, yeah.
So I just want to prevent the early game.
I think also when you're on coin, or I guess more accurately, I think when you're playing against mage and they are going first, the strategy for mage when they're going first is much more often just to tempo out minions and go for early Conjurer's Callings and things like that, just to be able to push out ahead of you.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense too. So now Orange, he has a pretty sizable mid-game, right, with the Henge Clan Thug and Edwin. Looks like he's going to go for Edwin right now to get some early game board presence. We've seen this also utilized. in their previous series, I believe.
Yep, yeah, very much so. 4-4 Edwin. It was Rebuke into Edwin on a turn where Rebuke wasn't really having a massive impact in terms of spell disruption, I think, just to get the Edwin down. But it's something not just Orange I've seen various players go for in this matchup. Just, you know, get an Edwin down as a big minion early on. And yeah, 4-4 for 3 is still a big minion. If you can get it down early, it's very difficult for Mage to deal with. It's likely to live for, you know, 4, 5, 6 turns from this point.
Yeah. Just get stats a little bit better than the mana curve. It's still good. It's that flexibility of it. Blink Fox gets Conjurer's Calling. That is really interesting.
Okay, this just got wacky.
It usually does. And then Orange also picks up Spear of the Shark, by the way. Once again, getting Henchman Burglar, Spear of the Sharks. So it seems like no matter how it's sliced here, Kolento's going to lose the board. And he's going to have to figure out a way to come back. Orange debating how he wants to utilize these Vendettas. If he wants to use one right now to stop any banana buffoons from getting optimal traits for Kolento.
It is potentially revealing some information to pause that heavily at that point. Backstab, Vendetta, or potentially Shadow Step, I guess, could be a thing that you are thinking about at that point. You could also just be bluffing, I guess, but that rarely happens.
Yeah, which is definitely something that I think some Hearthstone players do account for. Maybe this is where, like, you know, specific nuanced knowledge of like who you're playing against can do that. Because I do know some players who like have set play patterns. They always wait for the rope to start before they make their play. They always make sure to rope at the very end, and by doing so, they kind of like obscure their information of whether or not they're holding certain cards. And some players just like, it doesn't matter. Just play the cards at green, play it so it's in play, hit them so that they're dead. Just keep things really fundamental and basic so they're not overthinking things. And there's merit to both camps, obviously. Kolento, I think he doesn't want things to get way out of control on the board here, so I like the ability for him to buff his Banana Buffoon. Interestingly enough, too, it's a bit of a punish for not using the Vendetta in this spot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's why it was a genuine consideration for Orange in that spot, because he knows it's a banana buffoon, right? He knows that there's the bananas there. He knows that just even without the Ray of Frost, buffing it to a 4-4 and then trading over the 3-3 is actually like kind of a rough spot for Orange to be in, because he doesn't have Dagger up currently, and he wants to spend 4 on doing something this turn. He doesn't want to spend that on the Dagger. So the fact that Kolento had the Ray of Frost to go alongside that, I think ends up, you know, potentially even worse for Orange. But from Kolento's side, I love the play because we've talked at length. Like he has to fight early. He has to really gain tempo early on, especially with the hand that he's been dealt. And he just made the best tempo play he could that turn.
Right, and the second Ray of Frost is where I marked this pretty interesting, but in a good way, because then he's preparing for a Zilliax.
Yes.
So he's already accounting for the fact if things don't go very well. And he can utilize Zilliax to trade into the 4-2 and get back on the board. Orange given some pretty decent tools here. Heroic Strike, Claw, Soul of Forest. You can make cases for all of them. Vendetta to deal 1 damage. Not the worst thing in the world. The Evocation with the Mana Cyclone. So that gives Kolento a backup option after he's done dumping his hand, which is a really good thing to have in this back pocket. Although he would have liked to have it the previous turn, because it would have been a nice way to button up all those Rays of Frost.
With the bananas, because that's actually, it's a very interesting equation, what just happened on the past couple of turns, where Orange could have Vendetted a banana buffoon. He didn't. It traded over one of his minions first, and then he ended up Vendettaing it anyway, which sounds terrible for Orange on the surface. But then if you start digging a little deeper, in the meantime, he got 2 bananas out of his opponent's hand, which would reduce his Mountain Giant, increase his Mountain Giant cost. It would weaken any Cyclones. It weakens the Sorcerer's Apprentice in the hand. So, like, who actually came out the better in that exchange, where the Vendetta, like, the Banana Buffoon was allowed to trade first? It's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, Orange seems a lot better positioned now, because Kolento doesn't get those resources.
So many options.
This is starting to look like the turn where Orange is just going to fully take over, because Kolento's options are very limited. Hunter is calling on an Edwin. What?
He just gets 2 other rogue cards. 2 cards in his deck.
Yes. Vendetta number 2 comes down. I think Orange recognizing here that, you know, even though that's his security blanket against Giants, this isn't really a Giants game for Kolento right now. Like, that's not what this is about. This is just Kolento trying to fight for tempo as honestly as he can with a very dishonest deck, and Orange is adapting accordingly.
Okay, well, Kolento does pick up another Ray of Frost, and with that, 4 spells will be used before the Mana Cyclone.
Yep. Now, all of a sudden, that Mountain Giant is getting quite playable.
Ho. Tome of Intellect, Arcane Missiles, Shooting Star. Guess the Tome of Intellect is better. Arcane Missiles isn't guaranteed where it lands. Oh, another useful utility card here.
It's a decent upgrade.
Very good. Frostbolt's one of the best outcomes you could possibly get.
Yep.
Off of, well, it wasn't a magic trick, excuse me. It was a Tome of Intellect, but still, very good card.
Orange will be somewhere close to just starting to count damage again, the way he won one of his games in the first series against Kolento. What is happening? Where he literally just 30'd his opponent over a couple of turns just with bouncing Leroys in a game that otherwise looked completely lost.
Yeah, this is 11 power ribs on the board. Now Kolento has his own Vendetta tempo play right back, with Scorch costing 1 mana because the Mana Cyclone is an elemental.
Yep. It's nice when you just have a built-in combo like that, right? Like, the only way you're playing Scorch in your deck is if you got it off a Mana Cyclone, and if you got it off a Mana Cyclone, the combo's already activated. Beautiful.
Sea Giant costs 6, so it can come down with the Scorch. Mountain Giant's also cheaper. If you keep dumping your hand, Mountain Giant gets a bit pricey.
Right. Also, the way this game is developed, Kolento doesn't have too many reads on too many cards from his opponent's hand, because most of the cards that were from the far left have been used. Like the Vendettas that were played from the opening hand, like the Spirit and the Shark and the Leroy have been there for a couple of turns. But, you know, at least 60% of the hand, like, Kolento has really no information from because it's randomly generated or brand new.
Yeah, I like this use of the Frostbolt over the Scorch. Scorch will still cost 1 mana on the following turn, because the Mountain Giant is also an elemental.
That is true.
So instead of just pulling the trigger on Scorch just because you can, get a little bit more costly removal spells and try to squeeze in more efficient plays on the following turns.
8 damage now. Leroy, 14. Heroic Strike, 18. Eviscerate, 22. So he's still some way off, even if he lands all damage to face. He does have that Spirit of the Shark to back that up, though. So Lackey generators off the top into Kobold Lackey or the Life Drinker can help to bridge that gap, but it's definitely too far away to think about just recklessly ignoring a Giant at this point. I think dealing with this is very responsible for Orange.
Yeah, but that's exactly what Kolento wants, right? Well, assuming that Orange is just going to full trade, and it's the idea that he's using all these resources.
Right.
Heroic Strike to the face, setting up a potential lethal, Leroy lethal.
Yep.
6, 7, 13. So
Shadow Step.
Shadow Step would do it. Or a Life Drinker. No, it doesn't have enough mana.
Nope.
And now maybe Kolento thinks Antonidas is probably going to be difficult to remove if he's using all of these cards. Did Orange overextend? Aha. Or did he set things up perfectly? Spirit of the Shark, Evil Miscreant. Gets 1 Goblin Lackey and this Antonidas goes down. But if he whiffs, he could be in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that he still gets a few turns from this point, even if the Antonidas sticks to the board. He's not being directly threatened with lethal.
Oh, he finds the Kobold Lackey. So,
for example, he right now has the opportunity to just jam 7 to face with the Kobold Lackey.
Ah, okay, so that's what you're thinking about. He did use Iliacs too.
Right. And then, so
So
7 damage
many
plus the one from the dagger is
options.
8, puts the opponent to 8. And then Leroy with the double rush buff off the Goblin Lackey with the Shark still on the board is the 8 you need.
Yeah, you're right. It required Kolento to get taunts of some kind in order to finish it.
Orange sticking with the responsible lines.
Yeah,
Killing the Archmage
I
Antonidas.
feel like doing that is a powerful play, but it also gives an opening to Kolento.
I agree. I think he's in quite a comfortable position. I think, like, ironically, the Evil Miscreant gave him the out to set up the 2-turn lethal, but it was also the signal he needed to not be desperate enough to have to set up a 2-turn lethal. He gave himself enough resources that he can just continue to play this out naturally and just look for a much safer way to set up that Leroy lethal. I totally agree with the play. Sometimes you just gotta count.
Kolento may end up trying to snipe this Shark. Does have an opportunity with the Arcane Missiles, but that is an unlikely scenario unless he's used Shooting Star first into the Arcane Missiles.
He did get it with a Cinderstorm in the earlier series, but that was in a match where he was already locked down and it was in a far less crucial position. This one matters enormously.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
Like, what must it be like to be Kolento? That is my question. It didn't even hang him out there. It didn't even make him wait. Just first 2, I got you, buddy. Kill that shark.
That was amazing.
What a guy.
Another Miscreant too, so Orange isn't done yet. Another Cobalt Lackey and Ethereal Lackey. The 2 best lackeys.
Now who's being lackeyiest?
2 best performing lackeys.
There we go.
Sprint for more resources. This is looking more and more like an Orange. Orange is gonna come out on top of the resources. Kolento still has the Frost Nova though, so that's something to keep in mind. Orange has to be careful not to extend too far onto the board here, and he's well aware of that. Making this trade with the Goblin Lackeys to prevent that scenario.
Yeah, the problem this Sprint's going to give him is, remember, Orange has switched to his secondary deck here, so he's playing natural copies of Walk the Plank and Betrayal in his deck, which he can dig towards with the Sprint, but if he sprints next turn, he's not going to have the 4 he needs to cast Walk the Plank and deal with the Sea Giant.
That's right, he's not playing Preparation. The Virgo Rogue has opted for more value-oriented plays as opposed to tempo-oriented plays. They still keep some of that with Vendetta. Luna's Pocket Galaxy. So, if Kolento just Frost Novas and double Conjures Calling, that's on average a 2-turn lethal, right?
Yep. Especially with a Fireball backing it all up. That's real lethal right there.
Well, now he can actually Conjures Calling his opponent's board and Frost Nova that, because he has Fireball afterwards.
Oh, wow, I like that. I like that you've seen it. I'm still considering whether or not it's the play, but I like it as an option for sure. Because
then what is Orange? Because then the thing is, Kolento has to keep in mind, if Orange just like destroys one minion, he's destroying his chance for lethal too.
Right.
So if Orange has like a Betrayal or a Walk the Plank, I think that's why he's probably going for this Conjures Calling instead on his minion. Oh, and he gets a big bag Archmage, which allows him to maybe potentially get a taunt minion to stop any kind of aggression. This Lady in White, High Spirit Togwaggle is kind of like Sprint. Maybe even better than Sprint. Yeah, it's a lot better than Sprint.
Does it find lethal outs? It does, I guess. Yeah, there's sort of niche combinations of things that will get you lethal.
Yeah, or at the very least, maybe some removal like Betrayal.
Right.
Very helpful in this position.
You need to draw exactly like a way to clear a space on your board, plus damage off this Wondrous one to find lethal.
Snap, stall, no. No.
That was close. That is a way to take something off your board plus damage, and then just the sap on top of that.
So, sap the 9/6, and then there's 14. You're just dead on board.
18 remaining after sapping the Hakar.
Oh, it's 18, excuse me, I thought it was 20. You are correct.
But Orange knows the fireball, right? Because
Right, yeah.
Antonitis generated,
Oh
so
my
he's
goodness.
still technically just dead.
Choose soon.
Takes him to 24, which still isn't good enough. Yeah, he knows.
Yeah, tried to hang in there, but knows that fireball is there. Yeah, Kolento just counting on just to make sure.
Reads the card. It's been a while.
Oh
Does
my.
fireball deal 6 damage? Yeah, okay, we're good. I think Kolento is actually teasing Orange at this point of like Orange has left himself in a position where he should know he's dead.
Right. Yeah, and it was probably one of those games where it felt like it was unwinnable for Kolento, and yet because of that Frost Nova Conjurer's Calling setup, has created that opportunity for Kolento to get that victory. And now we go into game number 3, and that was Orange, having 2 games back-to-back being on the coin, and having like the resource to snowball, and Kolento not having like that early game like incredible mana cyclone. He had like a mid-game decent mana cyclone,
Yeah.
and then he had like a tempo Archimedes Antonitis in 2 games. I feel like things are starting to really turn towards Kolento's way momentum-wise. And, that might be something that weighs on Orange.
Yeah, if you need like a very laser-focused signifier of that Arcane Missiles turn can be the moment where you say the momentum started to turn,
Yeah.
because there was a huge outcome for Kolento, but I think there was a lot of crucial turns in that game that Kolento had a lot of agency in as well. That final turn where he was considering, like, I like that he didn't Conjurer's Calling his 9/6 to put additional potential damage into his own deck. If he Conjurer's Calling the Hakar, like they went with the 10/10, you presented a great option of like playing around Leroy coming down by filling up the opponent's board, which I think was worth considering as well. But yeah, it's interesting to see that kind of bizarro world matchup play out though, because that should have been the one where Orange was more favored, and it just so happened that he was pushed on the back foot.
Because he just picked up his secondary deck, and now we go into game number 3, which I'm pretty sure everything should stay the same. And now Kolento finally gets the coin. So same decks, but different play turns, as Orange will be going first. And now Kolento has options as to what he wants to keep, if he wants to keep any of this.
We saw him in the first series really lean on Mirror Image as a way to contest the threat early on of Fairy Dragons coming down. We saw in one game he was able to play, I think it was just Mirror Image, Coin, Mana Cyclone, and that he just used that to contest a Fairy Dragon, which is a very effective way of doing it. So I was going to say, yep, I expect him to hold on to this Mirror Image in this position. Second game, he just kept a Mirror Image with seemingly nothing to do with it, and it just played out perfectly into this kind of Sea Giant hand that he ended up with.
All right, and Orange with an all-spell hand. Thankfully picks up something to do on turn 3. Would have been ugly, to say the least, if he picks up another spell. As much as Rogue thrives when it has spells to leverage for tempo, if you need a minion to really unlock the potential of this class. And because of how slow it's gone, Kolento very happy just to pass it back over to Orange here. Right. No Fairy Dragon on 2. Oh, that's a sight for sore eyes. Blink Fox on 3 here. Also realizing last game that Orange, got some pretty ridiculous outcomes like Caligos off the Blink Fox. It just never even came into play.
Nope.
Had he be given the time.
Conjurer's Calling as well, which he did make pretty good usage out of. It was a low stat roll off his first Conjurer's Calling, but I think it made Kolento, respect the Edwin because of like Shadow Step potential and things like that, like diverted Kolento into a weird place. This is something that I've been talking about all week, really, that's kind of interesting just to see all the different ways this matchup can play out, and it's not just because of all the created by stuff. It really does like change on a whim depending on each player's draw and so on. And even though that we've seen a lot of this matchup over the past few days and the past couple of weeks, I just haven't got bored of watching it yet because every game is so unique.
Yeah, and Orange introduced with a very awkward scenario again because Kolento chose not to develop and instead just answered the 3/3. It shuts off Orange's combo opportunity to activate that evil miscreant.
Right.
This guy's toast.
And this discomfort in Orange's camp is making me very nervous for him. And he picks
Kolento's side, though, is just stacked with options.
Right. It's like the complete opposite end of the pendulum here for Kolento. Previously, in the past 2 games, it felt like he didn't have many options at all. And he had to kind of make do with the theoretical path that he could get what he drew off the top of his deck as opposed to what was in his hand. He had to play with mythological cards that he imagined drawing, which is probably the hardest part of Hearthstone, but one of the most challenging and honestly one of the most rewarding feelings in the game.
And honestly, one of the most essential skills with Mage in particular right now.
Yes.
Like, it's a deck that really leans into that kind of thinking quite heavily. Like, so often you'll be staring at 5 or 6 cards in your hand saying, well, none of these do anything. Like, how does this deck ever win a game of Hearthstone? And it's about, like, working out how those cards work with your potential draws as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Hindsight and foresight, 2 really powerful skills that a lot of Hearthstone players, I feel like, don't hone in enough. And Kolento is doing a great job with it so far. Now, Orange finally has the ability to make plays with these double Miscreant hands. Let's see what he gets off his first Miscreant. Oh, the 2 best lackeys. Best performing lackeys.
Really interesting to see Orange go with the Shadow Step there instead of the Vendetta as his combo activator. It goes to show you how focused he is on using those impactful removal spells for high impact turns.
Yeah, that's something that we didn't call out earlier, which was, you know, whether or not he needed to have more removal, right? To answer like the Sea Giant Frost Nose.
Right.
Because he was just kind of stuck holding on to his cards that could end the game, but didn't have that removal option, which was really crucial. And perhaps Orange is learned his lesson, so to speak, or is just reacting to that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because based on his mulligans and the way that he's played and the way that I've watched him play the matchup in the past, he very much understands that. He does not use removal that's, you know, universal removal unless it's in a very clear position.
Right.
And I think that was indicated even in that last game because he holds on to double Vendetta in his opening hand.
Right.
Like we talked about, he can then just draw all the more removal on top of that, but he was willing to take that risk. I think it was just kind of dictated by the fact that Kolento got down to such a low hand size. It didn't seem like it was going to be a giant game, like out of the blue. I think Kolento just had that one big Mana Cyclone turn, but maybe that is something you're supposed to account for. At some point, they're going to pop off with a Mana Cyclone and fill up their hands, right? And then any game turns into a giant game. It's so hard to know.
It's true, and he did, like you said, indicate that he was well aware of that and was holding on to resources throughout the entire second game, I believe.
Right.
And now we go into this third game with Orange having a lot of removal. I mean, more than half his hand is removal at this point.
Yep.
I like the split on the Snip Snap.
So
Kolento
many
well aware of
options.
the single target removal options that Rogue has. Also, Rogue's just generally a lot weaker these days at AoE when they have to play Betrayal as one of their forms of area of effect. It shows you what the class really tries to do. Miscreant number 2. I'd say this board is ballooning up for a nice juicy Sea Giant.
It sure is. When your opponent is playing double Miscreant into a bunch of lackeys and you're playing Snip Snap on 6, yeah, that is going to be a pretty juicy Sea Giant game.
Another Vendetta opportunity.
Choose soon.
Yeah, I like it. I think he'll take all the Vendettas he can get in this matchup.
Yeah. Orange trying to restrict the board space. Probably going to dagger and take down a 1/1 because of the threat of that Sea Giant.
Right. The difference between 5 this way, or, you know, alternatively, he could have spent that on playing 2 more minions, and then the Sea Giant would cost 3, which is just a world of difference. Actually cost 2, in fact, so that would involve leaving a minion alive as well in some worlds.
Kolento picking up the Sorcerer Apprentice means that Stargazer Luna has some
Must be a way.
opportunities as well, but looks like Kolento
Someday I'll be just like you.
going for this Mirror Image Sea Giant opportunity and being able to play Conjure Calling for 2 means that Orange's attempt to restrict the board space isn't going to work. To make matters worse, there's still 1-mana spells for Kolento. Or sorry, cheap spells now.
Yes.
Now 0.
Good news for Orange, though, is that he does have... Oh, the Archmage is the worst because, like I was going to say...
Big targets.
He has the removal to deal with a couple of options here, but the Betrayal actually might make this work out okay for him.
Might. I mean, 412 is another very annoying stat line to deal with.
That's fair. He has the sap. Wanna give your opponent back a Nazari in their hands, Dan?
Soul. I've actually not seen Nazori played ever from the hand. I've seen it, of course, being summoned a handful of times.
Okay.
So it'd be a first time. I don't even know what its animation looks like. I do not even own a Nazori.
So many options.
But yeah, Orange has a way to deal with a lot of this, if not all of it. Walk the plank, sap, betrayal, all deals with it. But then the question becomes, how does he deal with everything? And more importantly, where's the tempo developed on his side? He's not playing Control Warrior, or at least he's not trying to.
I wouldn't be so sure about that, because Orange was actually one of the first people to really call out that he felt that when you switch in all this extra removal as Rogue, you are actually capable of just outvaluing the mage at some point in the game. Because, I mean, the reason he brought up was that potentially when they switch to beat Rogue, one of the cards they cut is Archmage Antonidas, which we can see Kolento is not doing. He is sticking on his primary. So if, you know, Orange indicates that he's going to try and kill every minion in Kolento's deck, that Archmage Antonidas could be the big kicker to try and find some extra spells.
Fair enough. Great removal spot here from Orange to clear everything. Now Kolento picks up Khadgar. A lot of removal was just utilized here from Orange's hand.
Yep. Yeah, and I kind of like this from Kolento. Honestly, he just saw so much removal being used, as you said. Just tempoing out 5-7 here. He didn't really have a huge play available to him with the Khadgar Conjurers, whereas next turn, he does if he wants it. So I like going about it this way. Just try and divert Orange's attention for one more turn into the Archmage Antonidas and then try and explode the turn after.
Orange looking for a Henchman Burglar card to deal with this. Swipe will do it. Oh, sap instead. Wants to push the damage. I don't mind that either. I mean, Orange has Shadow Step and Ethereal Lackey. Those are potential ways for him to leverage tempo.
Yep.
And Kolento just did spend an entire turn playing that 7-mana minion. All right, I can get behind it. Very interesting diversion.
Second copy of Conjurers, yep. So Kolento stuck with a hand. You can see how important it was to Orange to have had all that removal available to him, able to kill the big bad Archmage, the token that was generated, and the Nazari from the 10-drop Conjurer's Calling. Because if any of them had survived, he just had Khadgar Conjurer's Calling into Conjurer's Calling for the rest of the game as a follow-up. Now without that option, he has to do it on 3 drops instead, which is just nowhere near as scary for Orange.
2 taunts. Also, I believe that is the Violet something that summons 1-mana taunts for each spell you play. So a lot of annoying minions coming out here for Kolento. Oh, Sand Drudge.
There.
Why did I saw the thing was Violet? Probably because I just saw it have Violet aura.
I mean, you got what it did, right? That's the important part.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a Violet teacher effect. I think
Sure,
that's probably why I
makes
also
sense.
associated with it. Sprint, preparation, daring escape. Daring escape on this board is incredible value.
It's kind of
but
juicy, right?
it's, you know, Orange might be recognizing that he doesn't necessarily need the value off of that. I think he wants the board presence, honestly. Betrayal number 2 coming into big, coming up big here for Orange. Being able to deal 6 damage for 2 mana. It's so efficient.
But I think Orange might just be recognizing that kind of spot again right now where he says, you know, I don't have to be in a huge hurry to win this game. If I can just keep up a little bit of pressure, make Kolento have to play a little bit inefficiently, I can keep playing for value for quite some time still. You know, 2 Miscreants still on the board, Shadow Step in hand, and he just picked up a Sprint. Like, he can keep going for some time here. All the time he can threaten lethal alongside that as well, then that's just keeping both bases covered.
Orange also, the moment he draws Leroy, is a game victory for himself.
Yep.
Oh, Orange, Kolento picks up the worst draw here, I think, in his deck. Element Evocation does absolutely nothing. But what he can do is use Antonius to freeze. And now that he's seen pretty much every randomly generated card except for the Mage one from the Blink Fox a while ago.
Right.
That could be his cue to go in. Maybe, does he want to throw in the Evocation perhaps? To get another Fireball? Opts against it. Spear the Shark. But no minion. Oh, he has a Shadow Step.
He has a Shadow Step, yeah.
Okay, okay. 3, 4, 5, 6 power on the board. No Kobold Lackey. This is spicing up, man. I don't know who's gonna. I can really see both sides winning
so
here.
many options.
He would need 3 Kobold Lackeys for lethal this turn. Can happen.
See, I'm not. So if Kolento picked up Frost Nova, he had an opportunity for triple Fireball being the game-ending damage here.
Sure.
And now Kolento, who's trying to stay awake apparently. Evil Miscreant is gonna have to try and give him some gas here. Finds another Ethereal Lackey to find 2 more spells if he can find a way to deal single target removal. Sap.
Oh. That is so huge.
And Cold Blood.
Choose soon.
Yeah, I like Orange's picks there, obviously, but I especially like that he just took a nice responsible amount of time to consider the other options as well. And now he's able to push so much damage, just trading for board space to be able to make more aggressive things happen this turn, or to leave himself potential outs for Leroy off the top if there's a Frost Nova coming down. All of this makes a ton of sense. Just push that damage.
7 is a break point. Frost Nova. The opportunity was there. If he was able to convert the Fireball number 3.
Oh, you're so right.
I was thinking about Elemental Evocation, right? Because it gives you, you know, that 19-point damage.
Yeah,
Granted,
yeah.
Of course, Orange could have Life Drinker at any point
Yes,
and
yes,
throw
yes, yes,
things
yes,
into
yes.
a mix, but now Kolento doesn't even have that opportunity.
Yeah, it'd just be like Fireball, Ping, Frost Nova this turn, and then you just have yourself set up for lethal on the following turn, because you'd have 3 Fireballs to ration out.
I think perhaps Kolento was saving that Evocation because he would be able to use that with the Mountain Giant and I think get 2 opportunities for like Grave Horrors. So there was obviously logic to holding on to the Evocation. And of course, if he picks up Mana Cyclone.
So it would have come into hand costing 6, because the Antonidas wouldn't be there either, right? That just got sat back.
Oh, you're right,
He wouldn't have been accounting for that.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So in that case, he just held on to it for general use. Orange needs to find Leroy to end the game. High Spear and Togwoggle. If this finds... Oh, he only has
Just
one
board space.
Yeah, board space, and he also has only 1 Eviscerate. But he can find Shadow Step.
So many options.
Backstab can clear a space as well if he gets hold of that off
That's
the
right.
wands and the 1/1. So Life Drinker, Shadow Step, and Backstab would be lethal
Sprint.
off the High Sparrow.
Yeah, drawing 4 cards deeper. Life Drinker. Vendetta. And another Life Drinker.
Wow. Means Orange just has a lethal setup on the following turn if he doesn't die.
The Ice Barrier to give him 8 life. But then he deactivates his Vendetta.
Is that important? I guess so, yeah. If
Maybe.
there's like mirror images coming down, blocking out that dagger swing going face. You also have to weigh up, like, is it worth
Oh
it?
no! Oh, he did it. Wait, did he mean to do that? His reaction implies that he maybe didn't mean to do that. But by doing that, he frees up his double Life Drinker space.
Right, yeah. I think that's. I think that was intentional. I
Okay,
think this is just like anxiety from Orange about how close this is. I think his play makes sense.
Yes, because you know, at first glance, that looks counterintuitive, but it actually is.
He needs 2 spaces on the board.
Very
And a Frost Nova was even drawn from Kolento as well.
Observe and
Making those 2
reflect.
spaces on the board incredibly valuable to Orange. There's also the consideration about whether you were to take like higher risk scenario to push the 1 dagger damage to face this turn so that you beat like mirror image kind of scenarios.
Right.
Because there would only be double fireball ping for 13 plus the Antonidas for 18 that you could see. Because making that play would involve not playing the ice barrier. But that's of course so much more potential downside. That was an incredibly complicated Hearthstone turn. Last turn.
Yeah, but I do think Orange navigated the best way possible.
I'm pretty happy with where he ended up, for sure. Nope. No help there for Kolento.
He has to try again. And I don't think there's any way for him to get out of this Life Drinker situation. Off of 7 mana, but I'll be willing to stand corrected. And with that, another Blue Master Flark comes out, and Orange has the Life Drinkers ready to go.
Double Life Drinker and the dagger.
With the Waggle pick off the top as well, Orange is going to seal the series 2-1 and advance to the semifinals.
You can see what it means, turning around, trying to hide his face from the camera, I think, just for a second. He's a very, very emotional person, is Orange, and you can see the combination of that anxiety building up as he was getting towards the end of that game. But most importantly, and this is the key skill for a top-level competitor in anything, regardless of how your emotions have you feeling, stay on top of them. You know, you don't have to repress emotions, you don't have to hide them, you can let them out, but that you can create a separation between how you're feeling and how you're performing in your activity, and I think Orange is extremely good at doing that.
I think that's what is reflected of making Hunter Race such a joy to watch, because obviously he's a great player and he's a fun guy, but during the game he's so well composed, usually, unless you play Rafam against him in the World Championship. And then at the very end, you can just see how the emotions culminate in that moment because he's really calm up until that point.
So it's interesting because I think in Grandmasters, Huntrace has actually been quite consistently emotive on camera, like really like stressed most of the time. Like even in like really won situations, it feels like he's letting more of that emotion out on a more regular basis. But I definitely would agree with you. Like looking at his World Championship run, it wasn't until he was faced with the world's most nonsense game of Hearthstone in the biggest game of Hearthstone that's potentially ever happened, that he really let it all come out. But yeah.
All right. Well, one for the books here as the drama has been set, and Orange able to finish off Kolento here in the bottom half of the bracket. Let's go ahead and check in with Orange for an interview. Orange, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How's it going?
All right, congrats on your victory. Let's talk to me about the series, both from the very beginning of the day and also to now against Kolento. What's going through your mind and how you're feeling about things?
I felt pretty confident going into this match, the first one. In practice, I've done really well. I've been playtesting against mostly Mage and detect my deck. I thought it would be a lot of Mage, and there is. So I thought I was prepared, but I felt like my draws didn't really pan out in the first match. Then now in the second match, my draws certainly panned out, game 1 and 2. And then so I thought I had it in game 2. And I'm still I'm so focused on every single turn, so I'm not sure if I threw it at some point in that game. But I felt like that one just escaped by the skin of the teeth, and then I see my opening hand in game 3, and I was like, yeah, game 2 was it, right? That's where I needed to pick up the win. And then managing to get through, the nerves really got to me there in the end. It's like I'm very, very, very confident with Rogue, but man, when it's so much on the line, you start doubting every single thing you do, kind of.
Yeah, the very last moment, because we saw the amount of stress on broadcast, you're reacting to your own plays, which made us felt almost like, oh, did he make a mistake? It's like, no, actually,
he's good.
It's just that the tension was really high, and you could really see it on your face. It was awesome.
So
yeah.
first things first, Orange. You knocked your backdrop a little bit. Can you just straighten that up for me? It's kind of irritating. No? Okay. All right. Fine.
He's got nothing to hide behind the left side of the screen.
All right. Shut down, I guess. I'll just be tilted by it. It's fine. So you qualified out of the group, obviously, going through to the semifinals at this point, which I know that's going to be huge to you. I don't have to ask that question. Does it mean anything extra that you're doing it alongside Hunter Ace as well?
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like our playtesting group for this Grandmaster season has been me, Casper, Fino, Say, and Mussy Boar, and that like 50% of us made it to the semis. Isn't that pretty sick? If someone told me at the beginning of the season that both me and Casper would be in the semifinals together, also on opposite sides of the bracket too, I wouldn't have believed you, and so I'm super happy now. It's just as much for me as it is for my friends. Like I like everyone that's in the top 4 right now, and I'm so stoked that one of us is gonna make BlizzCon, even though I hope that it's gonna be me, of course.
You should be more confident in yourself, Orange. I think you're a fantastic player and a great representative. And I think it's funny that you mentioned your friends, too, because you're going up against Fino in the semifinal bracket, a teammate, a practice partner, a guy that you've been hanging out with for years. Any thoughts on that match?
I mean, of course, it's kind of bittersweet. Like, it's a team kill before the finals. But then again, everyone in the final bracket is someone I would be kind of sad about facing for the same reason. So I guess playing against Fino is always fun. We have a lot of banter going on between the two of us. So I'm really looking forward for the match against Fino. He dabbed on Boar when he beat him the first time. So we'll see if I can avenge Boar.
Yeah, dude, Orange, you cannot let a guy who dabbed on camera qualify for BlizzCon. That cannot happen. You have to shut that down for us, okay?
Not gonna let it happen, Subtle.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Orange, for joining us for this interview. Congrats on the win. We'll see you tomorrow for your semifinal match.
Thank you.
With that, we are done with Europe. We have our 4 players in the top 4, Sottle.
We sure do. Yeah, incredible matchups coming up as well. I'm massively looking forward to them. It's Fino versus Orange on one side, Huntrace versus Psycho on the other, and they both have kind of unique little twists to them. Orange just talked at length about, you know, how much this means to be playing against a teammate and practice partner. But on the other side, Psycho versus Huntrace developed into a little rivalry within that division as well, because Psycho at one point said that it was the first week that he felt nervous when he was playing against Huntrace. Quote, because I was playing against a pro this week, which is just the most deliciously subtle shade at everyone else in that group, and I love it. But he was, you know, very honest in saying that he felt like when he was up against Huntrace that he had to kind of perform on a different level to come up to how good Huntrace is.
Yeah, and it's also the 1 and 2 points leader for a long time in Europe, and then you insert Fino, who was like 3rd in that mix.
Yep.
Not a surprise to see 3 out of the top 4 would be our points leaders throughout last year, and then of course either Kolento or Orange or any other players, honestly, in the top 6 or top 8 even, were worthy challengers for that 4th spot, whether it's legacy, whether it's highest earnings in Hearthstone history, or whether it's just, you know, the godfather Kolento himself. Would have been great. And I think we do have to call, you know, there's opportunities for players to even get better from this point on? Absolutely. We said that Kolento could have even potentially won that game, right? Had he had the fireball line. Arnold would have been 1 turn off from the life drinker. So a lot of what ifs and maybe things to consider for season 2. But nonetheless, great finish off for Europe here. And we're now down to 4 remaining players as we get ready for our Super Sunday Championship broadcast. We're going to find out who is going to be declared the winner and move on to BlizzCon for the World Finals. That's it for Europe. So we're going to wrap it up and send it over to Americas, but we're going to just go to a break. And when we come back, TJ Sanders will be joining myself to be kicking off the Americas match. There's plenty of action. We're going to find out if Dog's able to continue that streak or other players challenge him in Group B. So don't go anywhere. More Hearthstone Grandmasters continues right after this.